All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode of Christianity on the Spectrum. This is a podcast that documents around 10 years of ethnographic research into autistic Christians and ex-Christians. I've done long-form interviews with over 600 at this point and surveyed 26,000 online and done many surveys and got answers to them. And we ask questions like, what's going on with the autistic Christians? And one of the things that's going on with the autistic Christians is pro-natalism. Many people, many listeners to this podcast have been sending emails saying, hey, have you heard of Based Camp? Can you do one on pro-natalism? Do you know who Malcolm and Simone is? You would love them. Or can you do an episode on pro-natalism and the autistic pro-natalists? And to answer all your questions, yes, dear listeners, I have heard of them. I am, after all, the guy who researches online autistic subcommunities. It's kind of hard not to find them if you do that, and especially subcommunities that interact with religious people. And while the pro-natalist movement isn't necessarily religious, it often heavily intersects with them. So yes, this is a community that I have been documenting. I have heard your cries. This is now the time that we are going to talk about the autistic pro-natalists. And before I started this episode, I was just going to do this by myself and talk about it. And I thought, you know what? Simone and Malcolm have an email. I'm going to send an email and see if any of them want to come on the podcast to talk about it. Ideally, Simone, because she's very autistic. And I thought, worst case scenario, they say no or don't respond. But lo and behold, they said yes and did respond. And so to talk about the movement, the sort of autistic queen of the pro-natalist movement, we have Simone Collins. Welcome to the show, Simone.
Hello, Jonathan. It's so exciting to be with you today. I'm genuinely so excited about this podcast, though, and I'm thrilled that people wanted us to chat and for you to talk about the weird pro-natalist movement.
Yes, yeah, it's certainly an interesting one, and like in terms of me being interested in weird little guys, this is many for me to be interested in. You may hear during this podcast from Simone's side a baby. That is because she is with a baby.
Yes,
and
apologies.
You're just going to have to deal with have to deal with the cooing noises, but
yeah,
on this podcast, some
grunting. It's here, but
yeah, we are pro baby noises, as you have probably found. There, I have tried to edit Phoebe out of some of the podcast, but inevitably her screams have made it into some episodes. So yeah, pronatalism and the pronatalist movement aren't my specific field of study, but my specific field of study, which is autistic Christians and ex-Christians, does heavily overlap. So I have captured actually quite a lot of data on them. But yeah, I'm by no means an expert, but I think if anyone is an expert on this, it's Simone, who sort of, with her husband, launched this movement, or at least this incarnation of the movement. So pronatalism, I say this incarnation of the movement because pronatalism has pretty much been around since the dawn of man. Right? Pronatalism is the idea that we should have kids, and having lots of kids is good.
Yes, since the dawn of like DNA, biological matter. Yes.
So there is a very distinct evolutionary drive to motivate you to have kids, and people have been spiritualizing that drive or talking about it in various ways for the better part of the dawn of humanity. So when I talk about the pro-natalist movement, I'm not talking about just that in general. There are also lots of Christian pro-natalist movements. So you think of like the quiverful movements, the homeschoolers, the Catholics who have like 12 kids because they do natural family planning, which doesn't really work very well as birth control, or, the very various other philosophies within Christianity that are very pro-natalist. We aren't talking about those communities this episode. I mean, we might touch on them, but what we are going to be talking about in this episode is what I dub the techno-optimist transhumanism pro-natalists.
Nice.
Is that a label that you would accept for yourself?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, good. I haven't mischaracterized you. Yeah, so I started tracking people who were interested in this type of thing in like 2014. And 2014 is basically when I started my research, and I found people who were really interested in this. They were mostly Silicon Valley types, mostly tech types, who were not really religious at all, but very concerned with collapsing birth rates in the West. and posting about it a lot, especially if you went on like Slate Codex or Less
Oh yeah.
Wrong. You
Yeah.
found a lot of these guys, and I thought, oh, this is a interesting thing to be very interested in. But it really started to explode in, I think, 2020. That's when I started to really notice it and to really start seeing the posts coming in,
Mm.
mostly with COVID and the political realignment caused by COVID. I'm not sure. Is that sort of when you started tracking it, or you have a much better pulse on this community than I do?
Yeah, I mean, we've been adjacent to the broader rationalist or effective altruist community for certainly longer than we have been actively involved in the pro-natalist community. We started pro-natalist.org, our nonprofit initiative around raising awareness on the issue of demographic lapse and falling fertility rates and dependency ratio cascades in 2021, if memory serves. So it was, pretty late, but we were involved in those broader like Silicon Valley tech and rationalist communities much earlier. I mean, we met in San Francisco in 2012, and Malcolm was very embedded in those communities, especially at that time, and then ever since. So yeah.
Yeah, and I would say the thing that sort of separates you guys from the other pro-natalist movements is that EA rationalist adjacentness of the community and the way that you think through problems, the way that you rationalize problems, and just lots of the terminology you use is EA and rationalist adjacent, whether or
For
not people
sure.
realize that. I definitely realize it because I am very deeply embedded in those communities as well. And so most of the stuff that you guys talk about, I can track it, and I can also track the like reasoning patterns, and it's like, okay, yeah, I recognize where that's coming from. Oh, they're
Mm.
referencing this. I know where I was there for the start of scissor statements. Like I read that post when it came out. Um,
Wow.
that type of thing. So yeah, this is the movement that sort of comes out of this effective altruist rationalist side of things, but also has started focusing on that. I think it began to explode a lot more with the first time you guys were profiled in a major publication. That's
Mm.
when I really started to see people talk about it. I will say most of the profiles of you are interesting. They certainly paint a picture of you.
Not typically a positive one, but that's a core part of our strategy.
Yes, I was going to say, it seems like you don't mind and kind of like that it's not very positive
As they
and
say in
the
Silicon Valley, it's a feature, not a bug.
yes. Yeah, that's the exact thing I have in my notes here.
Yeah,
This seems more of a feature and not a bug. But yeah,
100%.
when you were first profiled, like I said, I was like, "Oh, this girl's definitely autistic." There is something like and the more I started to read about your life, I was like, "Okay, checkbox, checkbox, checkbox. Okay, yeah, there's something going on here." And yeah, it turns out one of the profiles of you, it did mention you were autistic. I'm like, I knew it. We got it.
There you go,
But
confirmed.
yeah, and so ever since you guys started blowing up, the communities around you have started blowing up, and also attracting people who aren't in the EA rationalist side of things. And around that, you've sort of grown an audience. You also have a daily podcast. I think it's daily. It feels like daily. I
It
don't
is now.
know.
It used to be every weekday for like 2+ years, and now it's 7 days a week. But only the weekend episodes are just for like paid Patreon and
Yeah,
Substack people.
there is so much content.
It's too much.
You
But I mean, it makes you can just summarize it all with AI, and that's kind of the point. Is that
yeah.
we just want AI to have access to all of this information because that's a major intelligence force that's going to inherit the future along with the humans that choose to join in too.
Yes, very, very sort of rationalist AI accelerationist in your mentality, I would say.
You know it.
Yeah, again, very typical of the EA rationalist circles that you guys emerge from. But yeah, I really started to track it with Christians, especially in sort of 2022, 2023. Is when
Mm,
started to see a lot of them getting more interested in this.
that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess we should more thoroughly define what it is. So in your own words, how would you describe your movement?
Prenatalism is a big tent movement with an optimistic view of the future that views humanity as good and the future worth showing up to, basically. Kids are good, humanity is good, and we want human flourishing. But we also want people in groups to have the freedom to pursue human flourishing by whatever definition they have it. without limits insofar as it doesn't limit other groups' ability to do the same.
Yeah, and another thing that I think is useful for this definition of what is pronatalism is what is the pronatalist community that you're a part of? Like if you were to describe the average person who's into your movement, how would you describe them?
It's really hard actually to fit a profile of it. I mean, if I think of the pronatalist leaders that I chatted with just today, like via text or signal, or email, one is a Mormon, one is a sort of evangelical Protestant, one is Catholic, one is atheist and rationalist. So we're all over the place, and we all have very different approaches to fertility, to technology, but we all, I think, are very engaged with problem solving around the future and very excited about the future and what we're doing in our projects and basically getting people involved. I think it's a very optimistic movement because we're just really excited to have people join and become a part of this and join us in inheriting the future collectively. But there's not the same stress that you might feel, for example, with the environmental movement, where you feel like everyone has to get involved in order for it to work, right? Because you can have someone have an extremely very, very small carbon footprint and only do all the right things. But then if their neighbor just buys like another gas guzzling car and takes several international trips, it's just everything's undone. It's it's such a contrast, and so it's a very low stress movement. So yeah, the commonalities are basically just optimism and broad happiness, a lot of activity in industry, which is again so different from the environmental movement. And it's something that you'll notice about especially the secular and more rationalist or Silicon Valley tech adjacent pronatalists is that many of them were originally in really heavily actively involved in the environmentalist or sustainability movement or something around climate change. You see this, like a really classic example is Elon Musk with Solar City and Tesla and all of his other environmental related projects and projects around sustainability. The reason why I think you see this is because Silicon Valley tech people are among the very few who are actually doing long-term planning and thinking. No one else really has the luxury or the incentives to do so. You need to think just 6 months, maybe 2 years max into the future. So you're not necessarily thinking about existential risks to humanity in the medium to long term. Tech people are, especially if they are investors or building moonshot startups. And for that reason, they saw that climate change was a really big deal and tried to address it. And then, of course, also they saw that demographic lapse is another existential threat that needs to be dealt with. I think we've reached a point at which, with climate change, that's kind of played out already a lot. Sort of the things that can be done and will be done, we kind of know will be done or are being done or have been done. And a lot of it now has to do with just kind of more moderate damage control, and human migration and just sort of tech refinement. Demographic lapse, however, remains a very, very big and looming challenge. And that's one of the big commonalities. It feels so refreshing, however. I think not just to us, but to other Silicon Valley tech rationalist EA people who came out of first doing environmental advocacy coming into this, because you don't need everyone to get involved in order for really good impact to be made. And one of the big factors that determines whether a cause is worthy in the effective altruistic world is whether a problem is tractable. Like, can you actually solve it? And oh, you actually can with just a handful of families, depending on how you're tackling this issue. And that's comforting vis-a-vis something like climate change. You can't have a collection of 40 families save the climate.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so you guys recently had a convention. The convention was called NatalCon.
Mm.
Well, it wasn't. You guys weren't leading the convention. You guys were involved, and I've had friends and research participants who also attended NatalCon, and I asked them to describe what it was like, and they said the autism levels were off the charts.
Truly.
Was that your experience?
Absolutely, yeah. It was such a yeah, the one thing that was super common among everyone attending, or a huge number of people attending, was autism. Like number one, prenatalism; number two, autism. After that, so many different backgrounds, so many different religious and cultural backgrounds. Yeah, the autism and the prenatalism were strong.
Yes, that is also what I heard about them. So yeah, I'm going to try to characterize your movement, and then I'm going to list off. I've documented 7 characteristics of the
Hmm.
types of people in your movement, and then you tell me if I get them wrong and how wrong I am with them, and we'll
Ooh,
just see how this
okay.
goes as a outsider looking in. So, first characteristic, I think that most people need to wrap their heads around is this is a movement largely born of the tech right. Now, most people don't know what the tech right means, so I will define it in my own terms.
Hmm.
The tech right are usually educated STEM people working in STEM industries, mostly Silicon Valley, or if not Silicon Valley, a lot you'll find in the defense industry and other places like that. But the tech right is different from the broad tech population in that the tech right is countercultural. Now, you might think countercultural, oh, like hippies? No, so they are countercultural against the sort of liberal, progressive, urban culture. And so this is a term you guys use a lot in your podcast, the urban monoculture,
Yes.
which is a term for the sort of cultures that arise in most urban settings. So it's generally speaking progressive, liberal, culturally liberal, libertine, and that style. The tech right is anti whatever that is, in
Yes.
the best way that I could describe it. And it often pits itself explicitly against them as being anti progressive or see cultural progressive values as at a macro level suicidal, and that we should be doing everything we can do to not be a part of those. Anyway, that's my
Yeah.
definition.
Yeah, I
Did I
mean,
get
not
that
even
right?
like everything. Like welcome people to be a part of that if they want to, in the same way that we welcome and don't fight against euthanasia. If you want to end it, but we're not that. And we certainly don't want to throw our children into that frying pan because it can be quite ruinous.
Yeah. The one of the characteristics though that I see is a desire to distance yourself from that side of things and make it very clear we're doing something else.
For
Um,
sure.
yeah.
Yes.
So the next characteristic, and this one people might immediately have their the hairs on the back of their neck stand up, but I'll
Mm.
try to be charitable in describing it.
Oh, don't
I
be.
okay, fine. I won't be. The characteristic is this movement is explicitly eugenicist. It is eugenicist in a positive eugenic sense, though. So it isn't like we want to kill the disabled or we want to remove the weak from the gene pool. However, it is we should be selective in maximalizing the best possible people that we can. So this is often called positive eugenics, and so I would say the movement is typically like pro fertility tech, pro embryo screening, get very excited about things like being able to do genetic IQ selection in embryos and that type of thing. Very normal in the EA rationalist community, but people
Extremely
outside
normal.
probably would see that and go, what the hell? This is less common with the Christians in the movement, but
Extremely uncommon,
yes.
actively hated.
Yes.
Let's be clear.
Actively hated is a good
Yes.
way to characterize it.
Yes.
However, the sort of intellectual forces behind this are, I would say, explicitly in the positive eugenics camp. And there's also an emphasis on like it's not that we want people to just have babies. We want the right people to be having lots of babies. It isn't like sure everyone can have babies. We're not going to stop anyone from having babies, but specifically we want to encourage elite, high achieving, thriving people to have children. Yeah, did I get that right?
I have
Would you say that's
corrections.
fair? Okay,
I have
go for it.
corrections. So actually, we're quite against eugenics, and there's obviously the connotation and denotation of eugenics. But if we look at what I think the most common connotation is, the denotation isn't very helpful. So you look at Wikipedia, eugenics is defined as basically believing that there are universally good and bad traits and trying to maximize or minimize them on a population level. We are deeply and emphatically against that. One, we think it's absurd and stupid to think that there are universally good or bad traits. A good trait during, like the Ice Age is a terrible trait during a period of, super hot climates. A good trait for space travel is a terrible trait for living on a specific planet like Mars or Jupiter. You're going to need very different traits for very, very different environments and very different cultures as well. We argue that, for example, if you're trying to choose a religion intentionally for your family and you're kind of starting from square zero, you should look at your inherited religious history, like genetically speaking, because probably over thousands of years, your ancestors have sort of been selected to work well with that cultural religious substrate. And they're not going to perform well and put in something that was, for a very different evolved set of people, because, there's a lot of selective pressures that living in a religious group will have on people over hundreds and thousands of years. So one, we don't think it's a good idea at all to be like, this is good and this is bad. And I don't even care. Like, I mean, obviously we love things like intelligence or like not getting cancer, but who knows? Like,
I was going to say, intelligence definitely seems to be something that a lot of people care about, and a lot
it's
of
very
people care about
popular. And
selecting
in
for.
most instances, intelligence seems to be quite advisable. It seems to be quite helpful. But also, I mean, there's an argument to be made that intelligence is not a fit trait. Keep in mind that some research has found that the biggest predictor for high fertility are polygenic scores associated with obesity and low educational attainment, which is often used as a proxy for intelligence. So who am I to say, right? What we care about and what Malcolm likes to define our stance with regard to genetic selection as is polygenics. That is to say that we want people to have maximum reproductive choice, and that includes the right to make selection based on polygenic risk scores, that people should have the right to look at them, to not look at them, to make decisions based on them, to not make decisions based on them, and to choose which things they select for or not. A lot of people are like, well, only certain people should reproduce, you say. You're trying to eliminate disabled people from the gene pool. You're trying to eliminate people like me. And there are a lot of parents in these spaces who actively are very interested in selecting against autism. We don't, because we think that autism is actually a very adaptive trait for the kind of future that we think we're going into. Other people don't, or other people just don't feel like they have the resources to raise autistic children. Fine, power to the people. If that matters to them, then they should select against autism. If having a really tall or short kid is something that I think would be ruinous to them as parents or as a family, then they should be able to select against these things. But yeah, we advocate for maximum freedom here. We don't advocate for eugenics, especially like on a population level. And again, we also think it's absurd to say that there's good and bad. I will say that there are prominent pronatalists who absolutely do want certain groups to reproduce more. And like, there are a couple different angles to this. One, Elon Musk is famous for being like, I want more smart people to reproduce. I'm telling all my smart friends to reproduce. And that's, that's fine. He thinks it is an important trait. He has noticed that sort of like our modern economy and capitalism in general is an IQ shredder. It encourages people to trade their reproductive years for labor and money and work at the expense of having children, and that could cause some negative effects, especially per genetic traits that he values. That's totally fine. There's a lot of other groups that are like, hey, I love people like me. I want there to be more people like me. Like, I want to encourage more people like me to have kids. And I think that having that group level pride is super, super important. And it's an important part of pronatalism that Mormons should want more Mormons and Catholics should want more Catholics. And one of the recent General Conference speeches, the president talked about the importance of raising LDS birth rates. And they really need to raise LDS birth rates. They've gotten really bad. They're basically almost at US population levels, like at the US fertility rate, which is pathetic. It's really bad. So to say we only want certain types of people to reproduce, that's certainly not what the pro-natalist movement about. The pro-natalist movement is about getting as many people involved in this big tent movement as possible. If you are a person who only wants your group to reproduce, you're not a pro-natalist. You are a white nationalist or an enthusiastic Catholic or a quiverful evangelical Christian or something like that, right? You're in favor of your group. You're not a pronatalist, because pronatalists want everyone involved, not just their own type. And if you want only your own type, that means you're just a stand for your group. And I respect that. Kevin Dolan, who organized and founded Natal Conference, this pronatalist conference, is a Mormon. He could have just organized some kind of gathering around pronatalism for the LDS Church, with the LDS Church, but he didn't. He tried to create as open of an event as he could, and that's what really defines the pronatalist movement. So, lots of notes on that one, but it's such a common thing that people point out. They're like, oh, well, they only want certain types of people. I'll make one more note, which is that when we talk about demographic collapse and specifically dependency ratio cascades and the risks of those, and to explain, demographic collapse is all about the fact that we're going to start to see populations level off and decline. Birth rates are falling, and this means that soon we're going to have more old people than young people in countries. And that means that we're going to be running out of productive tax bases to cover the costs of expensive social programs that take care of the most vulnerable people in society. That's what we refer to when we talk about dependency ratio cascades. When you have more people who are net tax drains on a country than you have net tax contributors, you've got a big problem. And this is a problem that you should care about whether or not you want people in the future, because if you care about human suffering, you're going to care if grandma no longer has benefits that can protect her, that allow her to buy food and get medical care and get, in some cases, housing and basic shelter. And so when we're looking at equations like that, it also really matters. There are only certain types of people that you need as a country, right? Like, you can't just bring in a bunch of net tax drain immigrants to solve the problem, because that will only accelerate the problem. In that case, the kind of person that you need to be having kids is very bad optically, right? It's wealthy taxpayers who will produce more wealthy taxpayers. And that looks terrible, right? Like, that sounds like, well, we only want smart, rich people to have kids. Well, I mean, yeah, if we're only looking at this from the perspective of someone to foot the bill for the vulnerable people in society, yeah, we only want wealthy taxpayers to have kids so we can pay for everyone who's not a wealthy taxpayer. And that looks really bad. But we're going to have to just face that, because if you don't face that, you're not going to solve the problem. You're going to accelerate it.
Yeah. So when I use the term eugenicist, I would use it in the term trait selective. In the meaning of just like specifically trait selective.
Well, which is literally everyone. Yeah. Literally everyone.
You chose your wife. In a way that's more intentional than like you choosing a wife because you like her. Like I'm a very tall man. I'm 6'7". I wanted a tall wife. My wife is 5'11". And wow. Part of the appeal is like, I'm gonna have enormous children. Right?
Yeah.
I don't really care that if I have like enormous children or not, but like just being honest with myself. Yeah, I like the idea of
you selected for those traits.
Yes.
You totally did.
It is not at like the thing I want to emphasize is the level at which the pro-natalist community tends to be selective is beyond that, I would say, in a lot of cases.
There's more nerdiness and there's more granularity. It's like, oh, I can look at a histogram and where my embryos stand on it. But like, what I think what's so much less controversial about it as well is that by choosing your wife, you also chose to not reproduce with other people. There are people who are being removed from the gene pool by the traditional way that people select for traits. Whereas when you're doing polygenic risk score selection as a couple, you're just choosing among your own genetics, like no one is being removed from the gene pool. No one is being sterilized. And so this is quite uncontroversial.
It's very controversial with some people.
Oh my God. Well, yeah, but I mean, just IVF is controversial with some people because of, when they define life as beginning, and we respect that. We think that they're wrong. We think that life begins at intentionality and decisions. So choosing not to get IVF when having IVF would permit you to have more kids is killing people as far as we're concerned. And as far as they're concerned, we have currently, children sitting in freezers and their souls are suspended in limbo, and it's horrible. And we intend to have all of them. But still, we get it. We're sort of at an impasse and we agree to disagree, and we get that there are trade-offs. But yeah, I mean, I totally hear you on that. But a lot of this also is eventually going to be moot, and a lot of families aren't really going to be doing this kind of polygenic risk score selection in this way for very long, because we're just going to do germline gene editing instead. And just, yeah, we'll be looking at polygenic risk scores, but then we'll just be changing genes. So it doesn't, we're not removing anyone at all, even from among the two of us.
I'm far more in favor of that.
It's great.
Just
We're
personally.
so excited for it. We're
Yes.
so excited.
But yeah, so I'm saying this because if a person who isn't in your movement comes to it, they're going to hear a lot about like we need more elite breeding pairs and things like that.
Yeah.
And people will read that in a certain way,
It
and
really captures
certainly a lot
media
of the rhetoric
attention.
around it
Yeah, yeah. And well, we lean
is
into it because, it's the kind of thing that gets media attention. And anything that catches and raises awareness on these issues is like, well, we'll take it. We'll take what we can get, because you get someone in to hate click and read about these terrible, evil hipster eugenicists, but then at least they become aware of the fact that, in the early 2030s, Social Security is not going to work anymore, and that we're headed toward some pretty serious issues that people need to plan around. So I'm all for it.
yeah. And so I think it's a fair characterization if you define it correctly and if you ensure you divorce it sort of from the various different types, but we could
Because
agree to
people are
disagree on that.
capable of nuance and
Yes.
careful definitions.
Hey,
Yes.
we are all about nuance and careful definitions on this podcast.
The
Anyway,
rare exception. The rare
yes.
exception.
Next characteristic: transhumanist and techno-optimist.
Mm,
I think that one sort of stands for itself.
yeah.
But the idea of like a techno-optimist future, AI's coming, and that has potential to be a great thing.
Oh yeah.
The sort of I look forward to being able to transcend my human form. Body
Yes.
mods, awesome.
Yes.
Try to hormone regulate yourself however you want.
Please.
Optimize, do whatever the hell, get whatever experimental treatments you want. Utility max your own body. Why not?
Mhm.
Is a really big strain that you find here.
It's
Um,
huge.
yeah, I would say hard, like we've talked about before, hard utilitarian and EA adjacent, and EA rationalist adjacent is another characteristic. When you go into these communities, I mean, this might just be because of the preponderance of autism everywhere, but it's all numbers and spreadsheets and
Yeah.
arguments. And if you want to get
Yeah.
your point across, if you come out like sounding emotional, they are going to jump on down your throat and like eat your breakfast. Like they are, it can
Yes
be
and
pretty intense.
no.
Well,
A big problem in the EA community and the rationalist community is that there are some people come in who are like kind of sociopathic, and they leverage emotional attacks and appeals to manipulate the preponderance of autistic members by sort of calling out their blind spots there and being like, how dare you say this insensitive thing, you're being a monster. And I think autistic people are so used to being like, oh crap, I misread again, right? Like I missed an important social signal. And it's a really easy way, as it happens, to shut people down if they're autistic. And so there is that exploit. So that doesn't, I mean, like, as much as emotional appeals in some ways don't land that well in these EA circles, in other ways, when they're played right, and they're played right by a lot of people, they're way too effective.
but more specifically, they are played along utilitarian lines. These are emotional appeals
Yes.
along utilitarian lines,
100%.
which is
Yes,
the thing
absolutely.
I'm trying to emphasize here is
Yes,
it's
that is true.
utilitarian, and like the dominant mode of thinking and morally reasoning is utilitarian.
Agreed.
It's math, it's spreadsheets. Another characteristic, typically high conscientious, low empathy. And what I mean by this is a very strong sense of duty, responsibility, and obligation. Like we need to care about this, but not super like individually empathetic. It's sort of like most autistic people. Like when you find them, this is
Mm.
like a characterization of a certain subset of autistic people. It's like, do they have a lot of interpersonal empathy for other people? Maybe not, but they certainly have a very high sense of moral call, duty, and
Mm.
responsibility. And those moral calls, duties, and responsibility are far more powerful than empathy. And so you will have like, we have a responsibility to do this deeply unpopular thing. I don't care how other people will feel about it. we need to go ahead and do it because this is the duty that we have to the people, and this is the duty we have to humanity, regardless of how others are going to interpret it. And so you will typically have that sense, whereas in a lot of and like a lot of people will comment who aren't autistic is like, wow, these guys have a way with words. And they typically mean that in a, they sure just say things to your face, not really considering
It's
how that might make you
glorious.
feel.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's another characteristic. Do you agree with that one or no?
Broadly, yes. I think it's hard for me to tell because, like how can an autistic person know what, I guess, authentic empathy is?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
know. Maybe
It's
we're
like
extra
asking someone to
empathetic.
imagine a color they haven't seen.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
I mean,
fair
a
enough.
lot of what allegedly truly empathetic non-autistic people do seems to me and to other autistic people I know to be like sociopathic, incredibly selfish, manipulative behavior and not empathy. So yeah, it's hard to say, but I'll take it. I don't have any particular corrections there.
Yeah. Typically also high ambition, high agency, like
Hmm.
believe you can change the world and that you should, and that this
Yes.
is in your power and you should grab it and do it. In a way, like you said, in environmentalist movements, there are sort of two sides of the environmentalist movement. There's a
Hmm.
yes we can and a we're totally screwed side. Uh,
Yeah, but this is the yes we can
this is the
side.
yes we can side, and
Yeah,
like
it's very much the sort of like male versus female stereotype of like the woman just wants to argue and like the bad thing to do as the male partner is to be like, okay, well, let's solve this problem. Like instead you're just supposed to listen and be like, oh, that must be so hard for you. And then what did he say? But like no, the entire this entire subset, this subculture is very much the guy who's like, oh, well, here's exactly what you need to do, like completely missing that like a lot of the people who surface these problems just kind of want to complain about it.
yeah, yeah. I would say this is a very action focused, agency centric, ambition focused movement
Yeah.
where you will find a lot of people in this are ambitious in ways that you might find other people are not, and willing to do things and take risks doing things that other people might not be willing to.
Yeah, and that other people find very grating.
Yes, yes. And the final characteristic, as we've talked about before, is culturally autistic. This probably goes without saying because they're from the tech right, but the
Yeah.
tech right is literally just culturally a specific brand of autism. It's that culture of
Yes.
autism.
Yes. Yes.
But anyway, yeah. So those are the characteristics that I've noticed when I look at these guys. So yeah, how many do you think are autistic? If you were to just guess roughly.
Like participants in the pronatalist movement.
Yes.
30% or more.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I had depends how you count, probably
Yeah.
somewhere between 1 and 7 to 1 and 4.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's fair.
between 15 to 25% is where I put it.
Yeah.
But that's because I'm just trying to account for all the people who aren't online and being like there are probably other people who are like
Well, but
interested
yeah,
in
like
this and
the
not hyper engaged in ways that I can track. But like
yeah.
yeah, so I found
It takes a
6,000.
lot to be a pronatalist, though. Like, remember, just being like, I think having kids is good doesn't make you a pronatalist. What makes you pronatalist is I think having kids is good, and I want other people who are different from me also to be excited about having kids, and I want us all to form this pluralistic alliance that inherits the future and protects our individual rights to raise kids and families the way we want for each other. That's very specific. Like, you have to be very active, kind of terminally online, and fairly autistic, honestly, to like be into that. Because otherwise, you're just, you're quivocal or you're just Catholic. It's just like you're just a normal Mormon. It's there's that. So it really actually is quite autistic in the
Yeah.
end.
It's really hard for me to track, and it's really hard for me to track because of what you just said. It is an extremely online movement, and
Hmm.
extremely online subcultures all are downstream of autism. and
Exactly.
and so like autism in a lot of these communities is a meme where like you like saying you're autistic or you're doing something autistic is sort of like a laudatory aspirational goal, that
Yes.
you need, that you have. Like saying I like did an autistic deep dive into something is a like sign of praise, or a sign that you really cared about something, or
Right.
looking at someone's analysis and being like, wow, this was so autistic. That is not an insult, that is high praise. So
Yeah.
there's a sense that autism is a sort of aspirational state in a lot of these communities, so it's very hard for me to track, and it makes it very false positive prone. I have found
Mm.
around 6,000 individual user accounts that I am very sure are autistic, like 85% or more confident that they have autism, just online in various
Ah.
places over the years, who would fall into this. Most of them, I mean, a lot of them have very complicated feelings about religion, but we'll get to that. But yeah,
Sure.
it is everywhere. You can't be there without autism. One
Thank
other
goodness.
thing, gender and gender ratios. So
Mm.
if you were to guess, male to female who are interested in this, would there be a, do you think it's 50-50, or do you think it might be skewed to one gender over the other?
This is really difficult because the there are a lot of pro-natalist women, but are they active online? If you're pro-natalist and you're autistic and you're female, your special interest is probably raising your kids.
Yes.
And so you're
Wow, so
not
true.
terminally online, like hanging out, talking, like commenting on our podcast videos. If you were to look at our YouTube analytics, it is like overwhelmingly male. But if you were to look at our Discord server and our most engaged audience members, like the people who like we have regular chats with via email or text, or like on Patreon or Substack, there are many active females. Like it feels more equal. It's still more male, but then it's more like 70-30, 60-40. Not and that that's still like these are the women who still have time at this point. Like they often have older kids in this case, they don't have younger kids. So it is very hard for us to say, but it's less unequal than you would think, I would say.
So I'll say this, and you can correct me if you think I've characterized it wrong. The enthusiastic evangelists in this movement are overwhelmingly male, whereas the sort of overall trend is a lot more difficult to track. The autistic women in this movement, there are lots.
Yeah.
There are a lot of autistic women in this movement who, like you said, their special interest is raising children.
Yeah.
These are, I find them very funny because they they remind me of my mother, who treated like having kids as a science experiment,
Mm,
and just like
that's
as
how
an
it's done.
interesting analysis. And my mother's autistic, but like
Love it.
had
Love
four
it.
kids and treated us all like she was back at the lab. uh
That's
anyway,
how it should be, man.
yeah.
That's how it should be. What's funny is actually the prominent public female evangelists of pronatalism in like the public sphere really aren't autistic. Weirdly, it's Emma Waters of Heritage. She's super not autistic. There's Catherine Ruth Bacallick. Catherine Bacallick. She's not. I mean, at least she doesn't come across as autistic
No,
at all.
no, I don't think she's autistic.
Yeah, I don't think she is either. Um, I mean, there's me, and I am very, but like
Yes.
Peachy Keenan, not autistic. So yeah, very very odd. But also they're religious. They're all of them are very very like Christian in a not autistic way. And like I feel like there are in every religion there are the social ones who like sort of they're there for the community. They grew up in it or they became really invested in it. It's their friend network. It's their life, right? But they're like extroverts, and they're not that deep into doctrine. Like one thing that really stood out to Malcolm when we had Peachy Keenan on our podcast was like elements of Catholic doctrine that like she wasn't aware of, that he was, and he was like, how is this possible? And I mean, she converted into the religion. And so, yeah, I think there's that. And then there's the autistic religious people who are like, oh, well, according to this
Yes,
thing.
yes.
and yeah, that's where you get them. So I think that's what's going on, is that the prominent public female pronatalists are of the social version of their religion, not the autistic version. And it would make sense that, of course, those people would then also be the big public evangelists, because they're comfortable going to the conferences, they enjoy it, they like speaking publicly, it's fun, they like schmoozing, it's enjoyable for them, and that's much less likely to be the case for the female pronatalists who are autistic. Like I dread the conferences. I do not want to go anywhere in public. So that all checks out.
So that's essentially exactly what I found when, and it makes sense. And this is a very common phenomenon around every movement that has lots of autistic people in it. These sort of grassroots, ground level online posters tend to be very autistic, but the ones sort of above them in the food chain tend not to be, because in order to get to that place in the food chain, you need social skills, you need extroversion, you need a desire and a drive to like other people and to be personal and like personable in a way that a lot of autistic people don't see a draw to and just don't really want to. And so the sort of turbo autistic women in the pro-natalist movement are all at the grass level. I think you are one of the few exceptions to that rule. But yeah, that's generally what I found. A lot of them are also not super into pronatalism, but their husband is. Autistic people tend to marry autistic people, and they'll be like, okay, that's cool, I want a lot of kids, but like I'm not into this whole online subculture. This is
the ideology doesn't matter as much to them.
This like, I care as much about like declining birth rates or any of the cascading effects? Sure, in a theoretical sense, like I get the argument, but like honestly, I just want lots of kids, and my husband wants lots of kids. Let's have lots of kids. That tends to be more along the lines of it, or there things like that. I think this is. I mean, I think this makes more sense and is sort of what you would expect. Yeah, usually a lot of the messaging as well is very like less wrong, EA brained, and that's sort of like male coded in it. And so you also have to consider those factors, that who's this being messaged to, and what messages are women getting? And
that's
women,
true. Yeah, it is quite male coded.
But it turns out autistic women are very persuaded by male coded arguments. They so
There's
so
that.
there is that, but just in general, it attracts more men because it's messaged in a way that's more receptive to them. Yeah. So religion stats. How many pronatalists do you think are like would broadly consider themselves religious in your camp?
By our definition, not as many as you would think, because there are so many people who are just, religious and in favor of their own religion reproducing, or they're just really against the idea of abortion. So there are quite a few atheists. There are quite a few people who came from religious backgrounds and lost their religion, but want to rebuild hard religion of some sort into their lives, and are trying to find a way to do that. Of the people who write into us, though, who really are part of this pluralistic prenatalist movement, many are quite religious, but of very specific denominations. Lots Orthodox Jews, lots of Mormons, and lots of Catholics. We're not seeing a lot of Protestants, which is so interesting. And I don't know why. Do you have any theories?
Yeah, so my theories are mostly around the culture and sort of cultural attitude and priming around children in evangelical places. It's just not emphasized.
Oh.
Like having children is like, yeah, sure, you should have children, but it isn't seen as like your vocational duty like it is in Catholicism. I can't comment on Orthodox Judaism or Mormonism because I don't really spend a lot of time thinking about those. But when you look at like Orthodoxy, Catholicism, and Protestantism, and you compare them and their attitudes towards children and childbearing, in the Catholic Church, if you aren't interested in children, they have a place for you. It's
They
the
do.
priesthood, it's
Yeah.
nunneries, it's monasteries, it's
Yeah.
religious life as a religious brother or sister or consecrated virgin or whatever. But if you're not in one of those categories, your duty is to have children.
Yeah.
Whereas in the evangelical world, there isn't like there's no separation or bifurcation of the people who should be and who shouldn't be having children. And so because you
Hmm.
don't have that sort of clean split, you can't be like, look, you're in this category, you should be doing this. Whereas in Catholicism, you do have like a look, you're not in the priesthood, you're a married man. It is actually your job to have a family and to have a big family, and this is how your life should be oriented. Whereas a if you are in Protestantism, that lack of bifurcation, I think, has some effect. I'm not sure that's a good explanation for all of it, but I think that's a contributing factor.
No, that
I
actually makes a
also
lot of
think just
sense. I think
culturally,
with both Orthodox Jews and Mormons and Catholics, there's almost this like family industrial complex. Like if you go to BYU, like, well, of course you're going to get married. You ring by spring, and if
I
you're an
mean
Orthodox
that's
Jew, like
super
it's just
common in evangelical subculture though. So
it
so like
is. Well,
yeah, Bible
okay,
colleges, that's like huge. The
yeah,
my
okay,
my wife
fair.
went my wife went to a Bible college called Briarcrest, and it was jokingly
Oh,
called Bridal Quest.
oh
Uh,
my gosh, I
and
love that so much.
yeah, the like the ring by spring or your money back was like the
Ah,
joking tagline, and every single ad that was targeted to women would have like a prominent engagement ring somewhere
that
like
is
shown.
too good.
It it was
We just
it's a
need
whole thing.
colleges that actually start selling that, like literally ring by spring or your money back. Like
Yeah.
literally, because I feel like that's one of the few remaining points of utility for college/university is finding a good spouse, like a fairly pre-vetted spouse.
Sadly didn't work for
Wow.
my wife. She
Mm.
found me instead.
It worked out in the end. It worked. Look at you.
Yeah. But I mean, like we got married, so we were both raised very Protestant. We got married when we were 22 and then didn't start having kids until late 20s. So like that's sort of normal for Protestants, and birth
Yeah.
control is normal for Protestants, whereas
Mm.
for Catholics, if you're serious about it, you're not doing
Oh
birth
yeah, okay.
control.
If you're serious about it, but if you actually look at the stats, they're getting married
Yeah.
super late and they're using birth control.
Oh
So
yeah. Yeah. There's like in theory and in practice, right? And so like but
it's
with
funny, in
Protestants,
Silicon Valley, there's like this whole thing of ask for forgiveness, not permission.
yeah.
And I feel like that's kind of a Catholic thing too.
Yeah.
They did it
Yeah.
first. Who wore
It
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 better?
it certainly can.
Yeah.
And so like in Protestant circles, it's just normal to wait to have kids till you're old enough, mature, and established. Whereas in Catholicism, like most of my Catholic friends my age already have 3 kids,
That's
and
brilliant.
I've got one. So
That's not the
we're
norm, though. Again,
yeah,
that's not the norm. The big problem with the Catholic Church is their birth rates are plummeting,
yeah.
and it's because they're getting married later. They're being too choosy. They're being too
Yeah.
intentional.
So, on the topic of religion, you guys have you created your own religion called techno-puritanism. I wanted to ask you, are you aware of meta-analyses of autistic attitudes on religious belief and religious disposition from like
Not
internet
at
surveys and
all.
things like that? Okay,
No, I'd
so I've
be
done
super
this.
interested in them.
I've
Oh,
collected a huge amount of them. Basically, wherever there's a Reddit poll, wherever there's a poll on like an autism forum, like Wrong Planet or like Less Wrong, or a place with
yeah,
just a huge amount of autistic contribution, the most common answer is I'm not religious. Typically,
yeah.
the second most common answer, if it's on the forum, is I prefer to create my own religious beliefs.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So, anyway, so when you guys announced that you were going to do this whole techno puritanism thing, I was like, classic autism.
Checks
Um,
out. Yes,
one of the
autism confirmed once again.
one of the characteristics that I found about autistic Christians is they are what I call internally syncretic, meaning they create their own religious beliefs by pulling in large amounts of things from other traditions and putting them
Mm.
together. Typically, they won't go outside of Christianity. Like they won't
Yeah,
fuse
keep it
Hinduism.
Abrahamic.
They won't
Yeah,
fuse Hinduism and Christianity, but they will
right.
fuse like Orthodox Eastern Orthodoxy and Lutheranism, or
Oh,
like
that's interesting.
Anglicanism and Catholicism with a mix of Orthodoxy in it, or like
Well, aren't they just
Oriental
trying to find
Orthodox
biblical
Anglicans.
truth, though? Because
They
I mean,
are,
in the end, those are all just different answers or different ideologies that are trying to get at the truth.
yeah. And so they go and they basically just assemble their own, but that is not a
Yeah.
characteristic you find very commonly outside of autistic Christians at the same level that you find them in autistic Christians. And so
I
I
really
just,
respect that. I mean, doesn't it
yeah,
just like bother you that there were just these church councils at various points in history where religious leaders got together and were like, all right, well, here's our stance on transubstantiation and like here's our
yeah,
stance and like come on, like who's to say that these bureaucrats are more qualified, well, like at a point in time when we had, less understanding of science and all these other things, than, a smart autistic person today. Like I
yeah.
very much respect that.
So my podcast has a sticker in the merch store saying I have a somewhat complicated relationship with the Council of Chalcedon to sort of like
That
show
is
this tendency.
everything.
And
Yes.
yeah, so it's a lot like, so this comes from me putting out surveys and asking people, are you Orthodox? And a lot of them would say, no, I'm not. Like, Orthodox is in, do you fall under the sort of broad range ecumenical definition of Orthodox, not like Eastern Orthodox?
Okay.
And so I asked them, are you Orthodox? And a lot of them would say no, because they're like, well, you see, the Council of Chalcedon anathematized the Miaphysites, and I'm not sure the Miaphysites should have been anathematized. And I think like the semantic conditions going along here were very complicated, and we should reconsider. Anyway, and it's like, okay, guys, that's not what I was asking you. Like, I wasn't asking you about your specific count.
But it needs to
Yeah.
be aired. Don't you
Yes.
understand?
So I started putting text boxes below every survey question, so that when an autistic person answers it,
Ugh.
they can give me an explanation for why they answered it, because so many of them would complain like, I checked this, but I wanted to let you know that I actually have a slightly more
100%.
nuanced perspective. And so I just started putting text boxes below those so
That
they could
is that
just,
is
anyway.
necessary. Yeah. I
Yeah.
feel like the
And
only reason autistic people don't score better on tests is that they actually are very uncomfortable with like the incorrectness of many multiple choice
yes,
questions. It's like, well, that's not exactly true, but like that you have to choose a less wrong answer
yeah,
is very
it's the
distressing.
worst.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I found there are sort of two camps that I find the religious people in your section of the movement come from. A lot of them, the older ones, so between the ages of 28 to 38, a lot of them come from like the former new atheist progressive left and have since converted or had a conversion shift,
Okay.
usually in 20, like usually 2020-ish is
Yeah.
when that
When
started.
everyone
So
had their crisis of reality and faith. Yes, yes.
yes, so the sort of COVID realignment hit this group the hardest.
Yeah.
And then the second most common group are the right-wing Zoomers who were
Yeah. Yeah,
who
yeah, yeah,
were
yeah.
maybe not raised Christian, or if they were raised Christian, raised culturally Christian,
Yeah.
and have decided to like hard commit to it now.
Yeah.
So I find the religious people in your movement that are on this sort of on the techno optimist side are that the ones who are sort of like traditional pro-natalists, they're usually cradles, like Cradle Catholic is
Yeah.
the one that Cradle Catholic, Cradle Orthodox are the ones that I
Totally.
find most.
Absolutely.
And yeah, but for joining your specific brand of pro-natalism, like the EA adjacent, rationalist adjacent, I find a lot are disillusioned progressives who went through the EA rationalist progressive side of things and went, this is not working. I need to do something different. And one of the things that they thought they would do different is what a lot of people were doing at the time, which is looking at Christianity. And a lot of them converted as cultural converts, I would say, who were like, I'm not actually sold on this. I'm not really into this. I'm doing it because of cultural values. And then after a while of being into it, they're like, oh, I'm starting to take this more seriously in an unironic, non-cultural way. And that's usually where I find a lot of the autistics is they have I guess, a cultural conversion first because they desire to be part of a Christian movement. And then slowly over time, a sincerity starts to build within them. And I mean, I've noticed
Yes.
that in you guys too, right? Like the starting techno-puritanism as like an attempt to do like the
To
trajectory you
impart
guys.
fitness to our
Yes.
children. Yeah,
Yes.
completely
The
unromantic way.
trajectory you guys followed is very common in autistic people and especially autistic ones in the movement. I've also found quite a few former fundamentalists. So guys who were raised
Mm.
like young Earth creationists and were like, okay, so this is obviously dumb, and I don't want to do this. But I don't want to like jettison the whole Christian project. What do I do? And they find a group like yours where it's very open to religious people, very accepting of them, but also fine with talking about evolution. And like you're not going to get
Mm.
attacked for believing in evolution or anything like that.
Hmm.
And so a lot of these people pre sort of 2022 would just straight deconvert and just become an atheist. But now there is sort of a diverging stream that they can go to, and it's one of these sort of tech right places where it's like, okay, you can do Christianity, but you don't have to sort of toss the brain out of the back of your head. And here's how you do it, and here's why you do it. So I've found quite a few of those, but I find most of the ones I talk to were former atheists. So we're atheists or non-Christian by the time I get to talk to them.
That
And
makes
then
sense. Yeah.
the rest are former more conservative Christians now doing something more rational. I have found a few who were sort of liberal progressive Christians and then became quickly disillusioned with that and were like, this is culturally suicidal. We're sort of driving off the cliff and no one cares. Oh, these people this seem to care we're driving off a cliff. I'll join
Yeah.
in with them. But those are far
They're
less
less
common.
common because typically once you fall into that, you fall into a lot of other really damaging mental feedback loops that are hard to get out of. You're in a hole that's hard to get out of.
I will say for autistic people, it depends. So for some of them, it is very, very hard to get out of. But for some of them, it's very easy to get out of because their poor social skills makes it hard for them to socially integrate,
Uh,
and so they never really fit in to begin with. And so they try to be in those communities, and they really tried it for a
and
few
fail.
years, and are like, I just can't make this work, and peace out.
Not
Anyway,
good.
yeah, why do you think this is such an autism magnet? If you had to guess,
This
like
build your own
your
religion
movement,
thing.
like why specifically do you think autistic
Oh,
people come in?
in a world in which having children is not something you do for survival, profit, or hedonism, you have children because either there's a religious imperative or a cultural imperative or it's your special interest. And so naturally, you're going to get a bunch of religious people or slash cultural people. They're basically the same thing. And you're going to get a lot of autistic special interest people. It's that simple.
Yeah, yeah. My reasoning is basically it's culturally autistic already, and so
Yeah.
slotting in and finding your people if you're interested in it is just going to find more of them. And then there's an effect called autistic homophily, where wherever a critical
Wow.
mass of autistic people
Like Silicon
gather,
Valley.
yes,
Yeah.
the critical mass builds and develops a gravity which sucks other autistic people into it, and
Absolutely.
they go like, I've been so used to being alienated and different from everyone that now I'm not great, cool, awesome. Yeah, so that's basically it. As the explanation really isn't very hard. The culture is very autistic and easy for autistic people to fit in. Not every autistic.
Yes.
Like there are lots of very progressive autistics who would not at all fit into these communities. But
No.
for if you're sort of on that tech right flavored side of the autism spectrum, you fit in here well, and the arguments that you get are ones that you probably be pretty partial to.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, and I mean, I usually do why do they leave, but I think the movement is still too young for me to really suss that out at this point. So normally when I'm looking at groups, I also look at the people who leave them, but at this point, it's only really been around for a few years, and so I think I'd be jumping the gun to start speculating why.
Yeah. I don't know of anyone who has left the movement publicly or otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, I know a few people who are like, yeah, I was interested in it, but like I'm not really into it anymore. But I don't know how into it they were. Like I couldn't
Yeah.
determine their bona fides, but usually those people they basically are just going through a stage of political discovery where they've left home
Perhaps.
and they're now looking at different political ideologies, and so they try this one out. It doesn't work for them, and so they go. But
Well, I
Like I
think a
said,
big reason to leave though is like there's a lot of especially young guys in their 20s
yep,
who are really into our community,
yep,
and they're trying to find a partner. And many of them have been looking ever since we've met them, in many cases several years ago. And I could see there being a world in which, they reach this point and they're like, listen, I've been looking, I'm not finding anyone. And I think it's really hard to be in this movement and be single and childless, especially if you're on the younger end. So I think that'll be when there are more people who leave the movement. That'll be the primary reason why is there's just too much cognitive dissonance to be a member of this movement, but to be a long-standing member of it and remain single and childless,
yeah, yeah.
which unfortunately is going to happen to a lot of people because dating markets are so broken, and we're trying to fix that, but we're probably only going to be able to start building meaningful infrastructure when our kids reach dating age, and that's going to be in a while.
Yeah,
That's what I worry about because we talk with so many young men especially, young women too though, who are really trying,
yeah,
really trying and not succeeding, which is horrible.
yeah. If I were to guess, that would probably be what I would see as the biggest pull away from it is just in the pro-natalist community, but single for a while would be pretty damaging to morale after
It's horrible.
quite
I
a
mean, that
few
was one of the
years. And
big press themes of the natalism conference was they wanted to do more matchmaking, but there were just a ton of dudes there, and there were like 3 young single women. It's
yeah,
very, yeah,
yeah.
this is a problem, and we don't have a solution for it.
I don't either. Yeah. So that's about all I had planned. Do you have any questions for me that popped up during this, or are we good to sign off?
I am curious your view as an outsider of how the prenatalist movement is going. Do you see like writing on the wall in ways that it's behaving unsustainably or in a toxic fashion that you think is working to the movement's detriment? Like when we look, for example, at church communities and stuff, like we've written up proposals for like the LDS Church, and we've had long diatribes about what the Catholic Church should be doing, if it wants to be sustainable over time and not delete itself or lose relevance. But I think when you're within a movement, you can be very myopic, and you don't know your unknown unknowns, you don't know
Yeah.
your blind spots. Are there any areas where you're like, this is not sustainable, or this is an issue that is they're going to encounter a lot, or they're really shooting themselves in the foot with this?
So I'm not sure exactly, just because the movement is so young in it.
Yeah.
But I would say the being so fused with the tech right might eventually become a problem if the political pendulum swings to the other side. So like
Mm,
let's think about 2017 or like 2020, even just 5 years ago, the
yeah.
political pendulum was way on the other side. And now the political pendulum has started swinging rightward and swinging rightward pretty hard. But if people start to become very disillusioned with that side and they attach your movement to being like specifically politically related to the goals of the political right, and the political right starts falling out of favor, then it's no longer good to be associated with these people. And so
Mm,
like that I would say would be a potential risk factor, being like politically tied. There are issues if you're politically tied to the left, if you're politically tied to the right, if you're politically
yeah.
centrist,
Yeah,
you
just
know.
with the way political
Yep,
polarization is now,
yep,
which is so funny because when we started pro-natalist.org, it was a specifically leftist like presentation.
yep,
It's like we want to help gay couples have kids too. Like let's figure out because we saw like the thing is birth rates are fine and pronatalism is fine with people who are
yep,
right leaning. Like it really is. Where it's falling obviously is with the urban monoculture because it is mimetically sterilizing. It is self-deleting. It is,
yep,
and we're like, well, I'm a little concerned. Like if we want a lot of perspectives in the future, I know where some are going to be lost real fast. And so yeah, we didn't want to be overtly political at all. But if anything, we were leftist, and now we're just seen as like hard line light. hard line, but I
Wouldn't say
just don't.
hardline. Maybe that's because like I see real hardliners. I'm like, okay,
I know,
I
but we're
don't
still
think you're there.
framed in the media as like
Okay,
right wing extremists.
yeah. I
So, I
mean,
mean,
yeah,
people who
fair
are
enough.
trying to see themselves as leftist or centrist will
Yeah.
still not talk to us, right? Like, if
Okay.
we get back to that place where it's toxic to be,
I mean,
um,
I'm on the left. I
yeah,
think. I don't know. Depends.
I don't.
Depends who you
I mean,
ask.
well, I right? It really does though, and like that's the
Yeah.
tough thing is I agree with you that being seen as being in the wrong camp or on the wrong team in
Yep.
this age of extreme polarization absolutely alienates you from a huge group of people who then will not even be willing to engage with your ideas at all,
Yep.
like even in good faith, just like, oh, I'll hear them out. And yet there seems to be in many cases nothing you can do. Like I'm sure that there will be people, even if you see yourself as leaning left, that like I guess like the mere fact that you talk with like religious people, they'll be like, oh well, he's on the right. He talks about religion,
Yes.
like that.
That
Therefore,
is
he's not me. Like he's the wrong team, and I don't talk with him, and I don't follow his stuff. Um,
my podcast is very polarizing in the autism community because I'm not
oh
mean
really?
to religious people. And a
How
lot of them
dare you?
are very surprised and it's like my brother in Christ, I'm a Christian. Like of course I'm going to be sympathetic to Christians and I'm happy to criticize them as well. Like I'm totally fine
Yeah.
with it, but yeah, no, I get
Well, the
that,
best
but
critics of Christians are other
yeah,
Christians.
I would say another potential risk factor
Mm,
is the I see the sort of sincerity index on religion increasing a lot. And so the
mm.
sort of the transhumanist side of things, I don't think it has to be counter-religious, but in many ways it is. So
Yeah,
I think
depending on your religion, it's super
yeah,
kind of religious. Yeah.
but I think there are like ways of doing there is a very well documented pipeline, well documented by me, pipeline of transhumanist to Christian converts who still retain many of their transhumanist characteristics.
Well, and there's also the Christian to transhumanist converts, like
Yes.
the transhumanist Mormons.
Yes. They're
That
like
like
the
both the ones in the US and that huge contingent in Africa.
yeah. and
So,
so I think having, so for example, if the people who start to take over the pro-natalist movement are Catholics, IVF is probably going to die. Right, like IVF will fall out of favor and will become a sort of moral taboo, and so you have those risk factors as well, which isn't necessarily bad for pro-natalism in general, but like for your specific incarnation of pro-natalism and the sort of tech right techno optimist side might die in favor of the more hardline, hard religious, like Catholic pronatalism or something like that, and that sort of
yeah.
internal factionalism. So, like Catholics hate Mormons. Mormons don't necessarily hate Catholics.
Everyone hates
Catholic,
Mormons.
yeah,
When you look at
everyone
the
hates
polling,
Mormons.
Mormons love everyone. They're the
Yes,
nicest, and everyone hates the Mormons. And it makes
yeah,
me so sad.
and so like interfactional infighting and things like
Yeah.
that, I think it might start to become a risk. So this is something you see in like the gender critical movement. So the gender critical movement in
Mm,
its early days was like united front. You had the Matt Walshes and the Kathleen Stocks standing side by side, and then they
right.
won. And as soon as they won their cultural victory, they started to splinter. Um, and so when
Yeah,
you
that is
are
the unspoken sad reality of prenatalism is that for a lot of the groups, and we talk about this in the Pragmatist Guide to Crafting Religion, there are two different types of culture slash religion. There's one type, and they're both assholes. One type believes that everyone must be saved and that we don't want anyone to go to hell, so we want to save everyone. That's Islam, that's Catholicism. It is your moral imperative to save everyone, but that also means that you like the jerk part of it is that you are forcing your religion on everyone. You want the Catholic caliphate, you want the Islamic caliphate. That is what it's all about. Then there's the sort of more symbiotic version, right? There's like, okay, well, the Jewish approach, or the Calvinist approach of like limited atonement, or we are the chosen people, and not everyone can be in the tribe. Not everyone's going to go to heaven, and I am not like, it's not my job per se to convert you. All I can do is what I can do, and the rest is up to providence or God or whatever it might be. The problem is that right now pronatalism is in this united alliance of like, hey, we need to protect our right to to inherit the future and to practice culture and religion the way that we want, because the common enemy is the urban monoculture. And that is the biggest, currently most dominant culture, which is one of those domineering cultures, one of the cultures that does need to save everyone. The urban monoculture imperative is indeed to convert everyone and quote unquote save them from their backwards beliefs. And that makes them a threat. The problem is that once the urban monoculture deletes itself, and once we, all inherit the world as our new high fertility religious subcultures, then the ones who don't need everyone to convert to them are going to try to continue to maintain this pluralistic alliance. But you're going to have a new domineering culture that is going to try to take over. And that could be Catholics. It could be Islam. I'm not sure. But we are then, then it's going to get to be the point where, like, right now we're best buddies with Catholics. But if they maintain this cultural religious imperative to save everyone, after this point, after the urban monoculture falls, we're going to be at each other's throats. They're going to be the enemy, or Islam is going to be the enemy. And it sort of depends on who ends up having the most power, who ends up trying to make that grab and start robbing others of their religious freedom in an attempt to save them. So again, like, they're being nice. Like, our pluralistic view is not nice in that we're like, yeah, go ahead, go to hell. Like, I don't care. It's not my problem. And they're trying to save us. Everyone's a jerk, because also they're a jerk being like, well, you're wrong. I'm going to force you to believe what I believe. So it is an uneasy alliance now. And you're right that is ultimately going to be the next big conflict. It's not one that I think our generation has to see, though. So we're less concerned about it, and we're more concerned about setting up the infrastructure that will create a very long-lasting day. Just like, we're going to make sure, both working with AI and other cultures, to sort of force mutually assured destruction, or like some kind of like UN of religions that's actually functional, where like we are going to stop anyone from trying to take over. And even though Catholics might prefer, for example, that everyone converts, they may agree to this permanent détente just because they know that in the end, everyone else will be forced to destroy them if they break that agreement. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And so, like, in terms of risk factors, I would say basically, like, whenever you look at a countercultural movement that's pushing against something, once that something goes away, usually it devolves into infighting.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
figuring
totally.
out,
Of course.
and so I would say those are probably the biggest risk factors, as like an outsider who's not super personally invested in this. Cool. Thank you for coming on the podcast. It
What
was
a pleasure it was.
great
I,
having
I
you.
hope that you'll feel better from whatever,
Yes.
virus or thing you have now
I
soon, but
also
then you're
hope
going
I
to get
feel
something
better
in
from
2 weeks.
Yes.
So be strong, and hang in there. And it's so worth it. And life is suffering anyway. So
Yes,
who cares?
exactly.
And it was a pleasure speaking with you. I look forward to the content you have coming out soon. I love the research you're doing. It's so cool. So thanks for everything you do, and thanks for having our voices heard, in addition to taking a look at the pro-natalist movement. Really
Sure.
appreciate it.
All right, cool. I am John. You can find me at Christianity on Twitter. Or X. You can find me at christianityon.bluesky.social on Blue Sky. You can email me christianityonthespectrum@gmail.com. If you'd like to join our Discord, you can send me an invite. Also, we are still running a fundraiser for the Against Malaria Foundation. So if you are interested in donating, or if you want to financially support this podcast or me, don't give me your money. I don't need your money. Give it to the Against Malaria Foundation and buy malaria nets. That is, so I'll put a link to that in the description. That is all for me. Signing off.